Welcome to the Stand Up Speakeasy. I'm Sareth, and every single episode of the Stand Up Speakeasy, I bring on a guest that I was hoping on to go on tour in the Central Time Zone, but COVID happened. But I'm glad that it kind of did because then I can have longer interviews with my with fellow comics, if you will. Without further ado, I'm bringing on Zach to the show. Hey, Zach, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining me on the Stand Up Speakeasy.
Of course.
Awesome. So thank you for sending me your bio and on what you've done in Chicago. That's a lot of cool stuff that you've been doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Yep. And let's see here. So we'll go through all of them, and then after that, I have some questions that I ask all the stand-up comics that I've was fortunate to interview, and then after that, we'll nominate your favorite comics to be on their future shows.
Perfect.
Awesome. So let's see here. You've produced an open mic called the Pyramid Open Mic, where the mic increased set times as the show went on. What inspired you to do that?
Honestly, I work in the bar and restaurant industry, so I was looking for something to bring business to one of my bartending nights, and I just wanted to try something a little bit different than just another standard, at least in Chicago, kind of 4-minute sign up, go up, and give people an incentive to stick around longer, and get people who maybe had a show coming up or wanted to work on a longer set and let them work on more than just a 4-minute chunk. So I just kind of tried it and it worked for a while. It worked pretty well, but yeah, it was a fun mic.
Awesome. That's a pretty intense right there. I loved the concept of it all.
Yes, it was intense sometimes. It was a long night.
Most definitely. And you also did the Big Easy showcase out there. That's quite a variety you had going on over there. What's the story behind the Big Easy one?
Again, it was actually the same bar but rebranded as kind of a New Orleans themed concept, and it wasn't really a great atmosphere for just stand up, but I wanted to do something there. And a friend of mine at the time had kind of produced in the burlesque world, and I knew some drag queens, and I was like, I feel like this kind of fits the New Orleans party vibe. And I just kind of tried it, and again, it kind of worked. And it was a Sunday night, so not a lot of other stuff going on in comedy, drag, or burlesque, to be honest. But it was a fun show and kind of something different, something for everybody. Brought a lot of fun people in.
Most definitely. And I've often heard about the Barrel, but I've never got. When I went to Chicago, I didn't get to go to the Barrel. What was stand up at the Barrel like?
I mean, it was pretty much a standard bar show, with the exception of so the Barrel's a small bar in Pilsen. Number one is it's a pretty small venue. Number two is it's a neighborhood. I mean, there is. I don't want to mess up the name of this. There is a show called, I think, Pilsen Stand Up, but it is. Sorry, I'm going to move this a little bit. It's at a more trendy, kind of hipper venue in Pilsen, and in kind of the more popular eastern side of the neighborhood. And so again, it was where I was working at, but I also knew the owner, and he was looking for something different. He'd tried DJs and like live bands, but the space is kind of small for that. And just kind of bringing it to a neighborhood, or a side of the neighborhood, I should say, that didn't really have a lot of comedy options. And also, so I did one show a month there and one mic a month there. But it was also an opportunity for maybe comics who lived south or west in the city to not have to go all the way up to Wrigleyville or Lincoln Park just to get in some mic times. So just kind of bringing it to a different neighborhood.
Indeed, most definitely. And Chicago's a really big city that I noticed when I went up there. And
absolutely.
And I don't recommend going in November because it gets really cold. That's when I went. So.
Oh, yep. It snowed this morning, I guess. I was asleep, but we got some snow already.
Indeed. I'm originally from Colorado, and it snowed today, so
oh, nice.
Yeah, the roads are pretty slick out there. But no public transportation.
Nope.
Indeed. You also produced another one similar to the Big Easy, called Wednesday Sass, featuring stand-up, drag, burlesque, and a variety show. What was those? What was that like?
So that was interesting for me. I co-produced that with a drag performer and a burlesque performer, which I do better producing stuff on my own, I think, number one. But it was also for that particular show, we made the decision to rent theater venues instead of doing them as bar shows. So it was a whole different challenge, kind of budgeting and marketing without the help of a bar. But it also gave a kind of different. The format was very similar to what Big Easy Variety Show was, but the atmosphere at the show, I mean, they were cabaret theaters. It wasn't like a play type theaters, but it was a little bit more upscale of a vibe and just kind of a different experience than I think what most shows in all of those arenas offer. Like it was, I don't want to say it was like a comedy club because it was very different than that, but it was a little bit more like a comedy club than a bar show in the sense that people were kind of seated at tables. Everybody was there to see a show. They had paid for a ticket. They were not just there trying to get fucked up with their friends on a Thursday night. But it was a good time.
Most definitely, indeed. And it sounds like a good time for sure. And I love producing shows on my own too. Like I can't really. I work well with others, but not in the business sense. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
for sure.
Indeed.
Definitely. And it was hard too because it was a show that, I mean, it was basically a similar format to what I had done with Big Easy Variety Show. So I had a very clear impression in my head of what I wanted the show to look like. And so bringing two other people into that wasn't necessarily fair because I don't think that they had as much creative input as they would have had we like conceptualized this whole show together. So it was a challenge, but I learned a lot. And I think we had some really good fun shows. Yeah. And I met a lot of awesome people.
Indeed. Shows, that's what I love. I love doing comedies. Like it brings all kinds of walks of life together. It's fantastic.
For sure.
Indeed. And the last one that you produced was called the Verse Top Talent Show, combining drag and stand up. That's a pretty cool concept there. What
Yeah, so that was
go for it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so that show I would book three. Well, it was more sign up than actually like booking, but I would book three comedians and three drag performers, and then they would each perform. The audience would pick their top two of each, and then they would have to switch. So the comedians would have to put on an outfit and do some kind of lip sync number, and the drag performers would have to do a little stand up, like a 5-minute stand up set, and then they would win money and bookings. So it was a fun kind of push people outside of their box. Yeah.
That's pretty neat. My pal Anna Lepley here in Florida, she produces shows, drag shows and comedy shows, like combined, like you up in Chicago. And so she's a cool person to meet. I'll have to introduce you to. That'd be pretty
Yeah,
neat.
for sure. I would love that. It's a fun and challenging thing to try to combine the two, I think.
Absolutely. Indeed. And so for the next portion of the show is questions that I ask all the comedians I've met so far in life. And there are a couple of questions. And the first one is, what inspired you to perform stand-up comedy?
I think I just like to laugh and have a good time. And I mean, to be honest, when I moved back to Chicago from the West Coast, I was just kind of burnt out on work and just working, and I wanted to do something other than just work and drink. And so I started going to open mics and comedy shows and just watching, and I just had a good time. And one night, honestly, I had a few too many drinks and somebody talked me into performing, and then that was that.
Awesome. I used to live on the West Coast too. What part of the West Coast did you live?
So I was in Vegas for 4 years and then LA for 2.
Awesome.
So
indeed, I lived in LA for about 3 years myself, and Sherman Oaks to be specific. So
oh, nice. Yeah, I was in Silver Lake, and then I worked in Echo Park. But a lot of my coworkers did movie acting stuff, so some of them were up in Sherman Oaks, North Hollywood, that area. So
Indeed, good stuff for sure. I've been to this Silver Lake a couple times for some shows, so they got some really cool shows in that area.
Yeah, they were. I mean, ironically, I didn't start even thinking about doing comedy till I had already moved back, so I don't really know a ton about the um, comedy scene. I went to a few shows and mics out there, but never really tried it out. But maybe I'll
Indeed,
go back.
we were in the same boat. I was a concert journalist out there, so I covered shows at the Echoplex and stuff. But I didn't
Oh,
start
awesome!
focusing on I didn't start focusing on comedy until I moved back to Colorado. So it was just like, oh, this is what I do now.
Nice.
So
I worked in a craft beer business out there, so I probably actually some of the coworkers and brewers and people I know were also very involved in the music scene. So we probably know some of the same people out there. But
most likely, it's a small town for a scene like LA, so it's pretty neat.
yeah, for sure.
Most definitely. And let's see here, Zach. What was the feeling like when you first performed stand up?
I mean, I was very, very nervous, but once I got over the nerves, it was kind of exhilarating. I mean, it was just fun, and I mean, you meet a lot of fun people and different people, like you said, people from different walks of life, and it feels good to just like be on a stage and make people laugh and bring a little bit of joy to people.
Absolutely, I agree. And what are your favorite comedy specials and comedy record albums?
Oh, so I'm super ADHD, so I am really bad about watching whole specials and whole listening to whole albums. I've like never listened to an album straight through. As far as specials, I actually really liked Dave Chappelle's the most recent one. I know a lot of people didn't had mixed feelings on it, and a lot of it was very polarizing. And I thought it was just a good, solid like comedy from somebody who I'm older than a lot of newer comics in the city. So, I mean, Dave Chappelle is somebody who I had seen do stand up before the Chappelle show. I watched the Chappelle show regularly. So I just thought that watching somebody who um, has been around that long, like, definitely keep true to his brand, but also kind of stay up on modern times and stay relevant and uh, keep producing that much material. I mean, I think people don't realize just how much work goes into like an hour. So to see him do those specials back to back and then to see him just continue to put out new content after all these years was impressive for me.
Indeed, I love the one where he had the Q&A at the end.
Yep.
Oh man,
Yeah.
fantastic! That's like one of my favorite parts of that whole thing.
Yep.
And also, Wu-Tang Financial is one of my favorite sketches.
Yeah.
Diversify your bonds.
Yeah. The whole like the Chappelle show in general. And I'm like not really a sketch comedy type of person, but the Chappelle show was a favorite when I was younger. I haven't rewatched it in a while, but it was in, I don't know how it would go over in 2020, but it was, it was a great series at the time. So
Most definitely, indeed. And let's see here if you can a couple of Chappelle's been on TV. We talked about his sketch and stuff, and he's been in films too. And what are your other favorite sitcom sketch shows and comedy films?
uh so um I mean, I love Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I think it's a great show. I think it's a really good. Again, I'm super ADHD, so I have a hard time watching like series the whole way through. Um, I think it's a great show because it does definitely add depth. Like if you've watched multiple episodes, if you kind of know the characters, but it's also a show that you can just pop into at any time and like watch one episode and it can be the funniest thing without knowing anything about who these characters are. So I think that Always Sunny is probably one of my favorite shows. I think again, I'm older, so like Zoolander has always been a favorite movie of mine. Um, yeah, I mean, I think
And
those are my favorite show and movie.
indeed, most definitely. And sketch this was Chappelle's show, so we got
Yep.
that one covered for sure. And let's see here. If you can go on tour with any locally known comics and internationally known comics, which comics would you go on tour with?
Oh, That's a great question. I mean, this is a very difficult question. I think okay. I think probably Marilee would be the first one I would want to go on tour with, just because number one is she's a very fun person on stage and off stage. Number two is, I mean, again, kind of having focused a lot on the production side as well as the performance side of the scene, if you will. I mean, she produces and sells out one-woman shows all the time. I think I could learn a lot from her and also have a great time. So I think that would be a good time, but that would probably be my number one.
Indeed. And internationally known comics?
Oh, I mean, that's a hard one. Honestly, I would say almost anybody that would take me. I think there's so much that you could learn from them. I think the industry is constantly changing. I think kind of the one thing about comedy particularly is I think a lot of people, there isn't really a one size fits all plan. It's not like a union job where there's an apprenticeship program or a normal career where you put in your 2 years and you get a promotion, and everybody kind of comes from different places in life, scenes that have different ways to move up. Some people moved up through the clubs. Some people did some sketch and got a presence online. So I think it would be awesome to just talk to pretty much any of those people and kind of learn their story. And yeah, I don't know that I could pick one.
Indeed, most definitely. I definitely have to check out one of those one-woman shows that you mentioned earlier, because I'm trying to put one together for myself, and so I got to take notes. So that'd be pretty rad.
Yeah, for sure.
Indeed. If let's see here. If you can get roasted by 5 comedians, past and present, which comedians would you like to get roasted by?
So I think, okay, this is probably problematic in these days and age, but Lisa Lampanelli was also a personal favorite and the Queen of Mean. So I would say Lisa Lampanelli would be one. I think in terms of locally, Ed Towns would have to be one. Probably Marilee again, because she can be very entertaining when she's being mean as well. So that's 3. Rob Lowe is always entertaining to me at roast, so I would say Rob Lowe would be one, and then probably Nikki Glazer too. I think I find her pretty entertaining on the Friars Club stuff.
Indeed, most definitely. And where do you see your comedy career in the next 5 years?
That's a great question. I don't know. I was kind of, to be honest, I was taking a little bit of a hiatus before COVID. I think I've been traveling a little bit during COVID just for myself, not for comedy. Obviously, not trying to spread anything around the country, but I would definitely like to do some road stuff, which I have not done before, mostly because I just didn't have a car. And again, I work in the service industry, so it's kind of hard sometimes, but definitely something I would like to do is go on the road. I definitely like to produce another show. I don't know what that will be or when it will be. I think one of the things I have a different perspective on about producing shows, maybe because I come from management in the restaurant and bar industry, is I kind of like, I'm always looking, I never want to start a show that's just another show. I want to start a show that brings something unique to the scene, whether that's bringing comedy to a neighborhood that doesn't have it, or to a really cool venue or bar that doesn't have it, whether it is putting a little twist on a show without crossing that line of being gimmicky, or like doing a theme show, or not allowing people to do their best material. But I definitely would like to be producing something else. I don't know yet what that will be. I'm kind of just waiting for something to hit me. Yeah, so probably producing some kind of show and hopefully doing a little bit of road work.
Awesome goals for sure. And let's see, I dig it for sure. And let's see here. You've produced shows, comedy shows. Which other forms of comedy would you like to venture off into, like improv, sketch, comedy writing, directing, acting, etc.?
So I I think if anything, comedy writing would be something that I would consider. I am really, I mean, how to put this? Sketch and improv are just not my favorite things in the world. The sketch and improv industry / scene, although at least in Chicago, there may be some changes coming to that. But from a business model standpoint, there's something that I have no desire to get involved in. And they're just not. There are exceptions, like again, the Chappelle Show. There's some sketch comedy and improv that I've seen from local people in Chicago that has made me laugh. But for the most part, for me personally, it's not really my thing. So probably, if anything, like a sitcom would be something, or probably something along those lines, if anything. But
Indeed, most definitely. And what is your favorite joke a comic has ever written?
ooh, this is a very, very hard one. I think, and this is probably not. I don't. I don't want to butcher it, so I'm not going to repeat it word for word because it's been a while since I've seen her perform. But there are two bits from the same Chicago comic, actually, that I will say are like, I've heard them over and over again, and every time I hear them on a show, they make me laugh. And they're both Kristen Toomey. One is her Starbucks vanilla scones joke, and one is she has a joke. I think the kid's name is Joshua, but it's about a kid's talent show. And those two jokes, like, I've probably seen 12 to 15 times on shows, and more than that at mics, and they never stop being funny to me.
I love jokes like those for sure. Like, I love, like, when I see my pals on stage saying those jokes that I've seen them say many times before. It's like, I love this one, and I'm glad this is part of your set.
For sure.
Indeed. And then, speaking of sets, what experience would you like your audience to take with them after your set is over?
I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing is just that they had a good time and laughed. And I think sometimes, for me personally, I'm just going to say that that's, at the end of the day, that's all that matters, is that I try to remember that we're on stage in a business that's trying to make money and that's given us the space to perform. And I try to remember that the audience is there to have a good time. And I think that goes into a lot of things. It goes into, sometimes my set gets derailed and I wind up doing crowd work, or I forget a joke and I just keep moving with it. Sometimes you don't have a very attentive audience. Half of the people may not have heard half of your set, but everybody's laughing and drinking and having a good time. And that's, at the end of the day, I get that we're artists too, and that we all want our chance to shine and to do what we want to do. But for me personally, I mean, the biggest thing I wanted to do is make people laugh and enjoy themselves. And if, I guess I don't really care how I get there. But if people had a good time during my set or at my show, I consider that a success.
Excellent answer, Zach. And so for this final part of this show is where you nominate the future guest for the stand-up speakeasy. And so with that being said, which host would you like to see on the show, a future show?
So I watched one of your other episodes and knew these questions were coming. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to say Adam Burke. And I'm going to say that because I think a lot of people don't really recognize him as a host. He doesn't, I don't think, currently produce anything and hasn't in a while. So he doesn't host as much. People think of him more as a headliner. But I've seen him host a couple of open mics. I've seen him host CYSK a few times. I think that maybe because he doesn't produce and regularly host one show, people forget about that. I've seen Cole's, which is a very popular mic here. I've seen the room get kind of out of control and the host struggling, and him like literally just go up and take over hosting for a few sets. And I've seen him do I've seen him host like a mixed media burlesque comedy open mic with like 7 people in the room. I've seen him host Coles. I've seen him host CYSK. He's a really good host and like really feeds off the energy of the crowd and controls the crowd, but keeps them on his side and on the performer's side very well. I also, and this may be cheating, but not necessarily a comedian, but I do think that Cheese Louise, who's a burlesque performer who used to be based in Chicago and is now down in New Orleans, is actually hands down. And I think it's hard for comics. In general, I think we make the best MCs and hosts because we have the most comfort level on the mic. But Cheese Louise is by far the most engaging and charismatic, the best host I've ever seen on a stage. So a shout out to her as well.
Awesome. Fantastic. And I'm glad she's in the central time zone too, so this is fantastic. So I'll reach out to her indeed. And favorite open micer?
Oh, this one is hard. Like I said, I was on a little bit of a hiatus. I work nights. I was busy producing a lot. I have not been to as many open mics as I should have prior to this. So I don't want to offend this person if they don't consider themselves an open micer anymore. But Jeremy Drasner is, I think, one of my favorite people. I mean, he's super funny. When I used to regularly host an open mic, I think I saw him in the very, very early stages of his career. And it wasn't necessarily pretty all the time. And it was not a very warm or welcoming room. I tried to be as a host, but it was in a 4 a.m. bar. People would wander in. A lot of the comics there were hopping between 3 or 4 mics. It was not the most supportive environment. And he just came back week after week and tried. And now he's actually incredibly funny. He's also just one of the nicest people. Like he can be mean in a joking sense, but he's just one of the most caring, kind people. And he just works his ass off and it shows. He's gotten very good. So
awesome. And your favorite feature?
Again, I don't want to offend anybody. I feel like Chicago, number one, I have not worked in the clubs at all. So that traditional kind of like feature headline thing is kind of foreign to me in terms of people that I've booked as features. I also want to say, I think when I started doing comedy, there was kind of this almost like a high school rotation of the headliners would move out of town, the features would move up. And there hasn't really been a lot of people like moving from Chicago every year like there have. So I think there's a lot of people who we think of as features, but who could easily headline most shows in the city. But we have really great people who are still here who have been headlining for 4 or 5 years, which is great. But this person is somebody I think could headline a show, but maybe doesn't get the opportunity to do it as much as she should. But I think Casey Larwood is a hilarious comic and not somebody that I've seen super often, but I've booked her a few times and like gone to mics or shows with her. And every time I'm like, oh my God, why don't I go to more of her stuff? Like she was hilarious when I started doing comedy, and she is still like every time she manages to surprise me and impress me. So definitely one of my favorites.
Indeed. And your favorite headliner?
I'm gonna so just strictly material based, like funniest jokes to me is going to be Kristen Toomey. I've been a huge fan since I started doing comedy. Had the pleasure of working with her a couple of times. But I think Marilee is another great one. Her stage presence, her ability to work an audience, whether it's a huge audience or a very small audience. I think I gain a different perspective sometimes having produced those variety shows, because sometimes my headliners or my comics are following a burlesque performer, a drag performer, and the energy is very different than at a stand-up show. And Marilee is just somebody who I've seen at dead shows, I've seen at packed shows, I've seen follow a drag performer, a burlesque performer. And her stage presence and energy and just personality is, I think, unrivaled. Like she could follow anybody and get any crowd going.
Indeed. And your favorite showrunner other than yourself?
I think I'm gonna go with an obvious choice, but for a not obvious reason. And it's more of a group, and I'll try to get their names, but I don't know that I'm 100% up to date on who's running the show. But I think comedians you should know. So the CYSK producers, both past and present, but I think currently that's Blake Burkhart, Ed Towns, Danny Callis, Joe Kilgallen to some extent, Jonah Jerkins. And the obvious reason is that they run one of the most successful shows in Chicago and the country. It's franchised out to New York and LA as well. But the real reason that I respect them is they run that show. They've done submissions the same way for a long time. And I think they get a lot of heat repeatedly for different ways of accepting submissions and auditions, which they don't have to do. They have a sold out show every week for at least, I want to say, around 10 years now. They've built a great show. They have a steady audience. They're making money. They have zero reason other than trying to support other comedians to change their submission process. And they've tried a couple different things, and the Chicago comedy scene has just treated them like shit for it both times. And I just have a ton of respect for people who have put in the amount of work, both in their own careers and in that show that they have, to keep trying to give more comedians the opportunity, even after it backfires on them. And take time away from producing a very busy show. I mean, the last way that they did auditions, they did them entirely open. They did a lottery. They did 3 nights. I think they added a 4th night because it was so popular. So these producers sat in a room in a bar and gave up a couple of their weekly paid shows and watched somewhere between 200 and 300 comedians do 5-minute auditions. And then people were still mad at them. So I have a ton of respect for those guys for sticking with that and doing what they do, both for their audience and for the comedy scene. And they don't have to do that. They chose to do it anyway. So I have a lot of respect for them.
Indeed. That's the toughest part about producing shows, is like looking through those submissions and which ones fits the bill. And it's the process is just, so I feel their pain and your pain and every other showrunner's pain.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I'm sure that that's a show that at least half of the comedians that come through Chicago submit to. I think probably half of us that live in Chicago have submitted to in one way, shape, or form. I mean, and they used to put out this Facebook post, which was when Kristen Toomey was still a producer, and it was very blunt but very direct. It was like, we're a very popular show. This is what we expect. Even though you're doing 10 minutes, you have to have headlined, you have to be a past regular at one of the comedy clubs, or you have to have done 2 of these other 3 showcases that we think are comparable to ours before we'll even look at your video. And people gave them a lot of heat for that. But again, as somebody who's produced shows, like, my shows were not that prestigious, and I got dozens of unsolicited clips every week, some of them from the same people repeatedly. So I understand why they set those parameters, but people said, "Oh, that's so mean. You're so exclusive." Da 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 da. And then they went the next year. They opened submissions to anybody and everybody, and then they did in-person auditions with a handful of those people. And they got heat for, oh, they only picked their friends still. They only picked people. They didn't even look at all the submissions, which nobody has any way of knowing if that's true. And then this year, again, last year, they decided to literally just hold open auditions. It was a lottery system. You showed up at the bar, bought a drink, put your name in the bucket, and they picked either 60 or 80 names a night for 3 nights. And their producers, I want to say Ed Towns, Danny Callis, and Blake Burkhart, I mean, they hosted in groups of like 20 to 30 in a row with no breaks. And Jonah Jerkins. So Danny, Jonah, Ed, Danny, who doesn't even perform comedy anymore, Jonah, Ed, and Blake sat in that room, I would say, each of them for at least 80% of those auditions and gave their undivided attention. And then people still have been very unappreciative of that. And again, this is a show that sells out, that sells tickets, that has a long-standing bar, that is their home bar. They had a formula that worked. They were doing just fine without inviting any of us to audition for their show. So, I mean, I'm sure the process could have been better or could have been more fair. I'm sure that there were people, I'd like to think I'm one of them, who should have been booked, who didn't get booked from those auditions. But just the way that people reacted to that process after again, that had to be having hosted open mics for a while. Hosting an 80-person open mic 3 nights in a row is not fun.
No.
So yeah, just want to give a little respect to them for trying to bring more people into that circle.
Absolutely, Zach. And that's why I've been doing this. Like, I'm having y'all nominate my future guest, and being like, all right, I vouch for these folks, and that's why they should be on the show. Instead of, I reached out to like most of the showrunners and everything like that through the spreadsheet on Google in the comic group, and that's how I got most of my guests. And then I'm like, all right, these are the folks that I know for sure that are like, all right, they're knowing the hosts and the open micers and the features and the headliners, and
Yep.
that would be best for the show. And
Yeah, for sure.
indeed, so that's why like it's like from every single level, I just want to like shine some light on the light of like the central time zone. So
I also think the one thing I will say, and he kind of fits in a lot of these categories, and I don't know that he's at the, like, obviously he's not necessarily the top one that I chose for any of those, but he is one of the CYSK producers. Somebody who I think would be interesting for your show specifically is Ed Towns. I don't know if anybody's mentioned him before, but he's just started headlining within the last year or so, kind of regularly. Good feature, hosts a great open mic, is a producer on CYSK, but he also, I don't know how to put this without making it sound bad. I love him, so this is a compliment, but he has opinions and he will share them with you. And he has been, he's the first one. The running joke is that he always is like, just remember, you all still ain't shit. But he's also, like, when I started out, he gave me advice both about what mics to do, how to approach mics, the social and the networking aspect, which most I ignored, but also like little things like give people time to laugh at your jokes, because I used to be very nervous on stage. Move the mic stand out of the way. So I think a lot of people have an impression that he's just kind of this asshole who wants everybody to quit comedy. But he also is hugely helpful, has run a lot of mics, has voluntarily, for free, guest hosted open mics for countless people. He's done a lot to support newer comics too, and he's been around for a while, and I think he would have some great insights and bring a lot to your show.
absolutely, I'll definitely have to reach out because those are some of the folks that I'd like to talk to. Because there's a Godfather in Orlando that's like that. His name's Ken Miller, and he reminds me of him so much. And my buddy John Brown in Colorado goes, the best comics are the ones that quit, and the worst comics are the ones that keep going. And so it's like,
yeah, you gotta. It's interesting.
yeah. And I've contemplated retiring so many times that my friends are like sick of it, and I'm like, gosh, I really want to quit stand up, but the stage keeps on calling me, and I'm like, all right, I'll keep going.
Yeah, I kind of hit that point. I work nights, so it's hard. I don't get on stage as much as I'd like to, but I hit a point where this was not. COVID has extended it, I think, and now I'm kind of getting that itch again, and I am getting it. And it wasn't that I was like over it or quitting out of anger or frustration or anything. I just felt like my creative juices had stopped flowing, and I hadn't written a new joke in 3 months, and I was kind of like, is this really for me? And I was producing a show that I liked a lot, but other than that, I didn't actually have to tell jokes because it was the drag comedy show. So I hit that point, and I think we all go through those phases. But like you said, sometimes the stage just calls you back. So I have a feeling that sooner rather than later, I'll be back. But yeah.
Indeed. And my buddies in Daytona Beach, they're like, you're the dirtiest, cleanest comic that we've ever met. Like, you say all these dirty things, but you don't say any curse words. And
Nice.
so they go, we
I
just
have to be
want you
better
to
about
come. Indeed.
I'm like,
and so I'll go for it.
I'm like Chicago born and raised, so I can tell, even when I try to tell clean jokes, there's usually a F-bomb in there somewhere. Not very, I need to be better about that.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Zach, for being my guest today on the Stand Up Speakeasy. And are there any final words you'd like to give out there?
No, just thank you so much for having me. definitely once COVID is over, would love to meet up and hang out if you're in town. Or if I get out that way now that I'm driving. So
Indeed. I'll be
definitely.
there in May and in August. So
Awesome.
yeah, so definitely for sure we'll have to meet up, and when you come to Florida, I'll try to get you on as many shows as I possibly can. So maybe set up a
Awesome.
whole tour for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Zach, and thank you. And donate to Zach's Zelle account,
Hell
and
yeah.
follow him on Instagram and Twitter if you can. That'd be awesome. And thank you again for joining me on the Stand Up Speakeasy. I'm Sareth, your host, and I'll see you next time at the Speakeasy. And have a great
Awesome.
night.